Daf Tzadi Beis Amud Aleph will begin Daf Tzadi Aleph Amud Beis, the Mishnah at the bottom of the Amud. Zok the Mishnah, Oinen Toivel Veichles Pischol Erev. Person is an Oinen, meaning it's the day that one of his close relatives was nifter, and he has a responsibility for the Kura. Nevertheless, he can be Toivel and eat the Korban Pesach in the nighttime. The Einan Midaraisa, there's a din of Einan Midaraisa on the day of the Misa. The Einan Laila, and Ninas Laila is a Durabanan. Now, even though there is a din Durabanan, and therefore it'd be also to eat Kachim as an Einan, but it's a din Durabanan, which the Rabbanan waived in the face of the Korban Pesach. They did not want to prevent the person from eating Korban Pesach, and therefore they allowed him to be toivel and eat the Korban Pesach for that evening and to be Mekayim the Mitzvah. So this is an example of an Issur D'Rabbanan that is waived on account of this Midin D'Oraisa, Mitzvah D'Oraisa, which has cars. The more we'll discuss other cases that are similar to this. So the Einan is Toivel Veichles Pischol Erev, but we don't allow him to eat any other kachim on that night. It's only the Korban Pesach because of the chumrah of the Korban Pesach, that it carries a punishment of course with it. Hashamei Mesa, if one hears of that is a shmua that his relative is nifter. So if he hears a shmua and he heard about it, that is the Yom Shmua is also has a din of aninus mid'Rabbanan. If the Misa did not take place that day, but he first heard about it, then he also has a din of an Einan. So he's Shamel Mesai, Pamalaket Aloyat Samais, or if they gather the bones of his close relative, and they gather the bones and they bury it, or reburied it, Toivel v'eichel v'kachim. He can be toivel and eat the kachim, because this is only a din d'Rabbanan, and even the day of itself is a d'Rabbanan, certainly at night. So therefore he can be toivel v'eichel b'kachim, and therefore he can eat kachim, all kachim that night, because this then the day itself is a d'Rabbanan. In the previous case is an Einan, the day is a d'Oraisa, the nighttime is d'Rabbanan, but here the etzem din is a d'Rabbanan, so therefore he can eat kachim, other kachim that night. Gersh in the sky ber Pesach, if a ger was in the sky Pesach, beishamei oimim toivel veichles pischol erev. He can be toivel, he's megayer, and he can eat the Korban Pesach that night. Besul oimrim ha'perish min ha'orla ki parish min ha'kever. But Besul says no, we impose a din d'Rabbanan, and he says that he's parish min ha'orla if the ger to be megayer, there's a milah, and it's like parish min ha'kever. We give the ger a din of someone who's tomei mace, and therefore he cannot eat the Korban Pesach that night. We don't allow him to eat the Korban Pesach that night. It's like parish min ha'kever, just like someone who's tomei tumas mace, and he needs hazah, shlishi, v'shvi. And we'll explain why we say that. So the Reish of the Mishnah said is that the Einan, we allow him to be part of the Korban Pesach, and he can eat the Korban Pesach and be toivel and eat the Korban Pesach at nighttime. Nighttime. What is the reason for that? Why do we allow him to partake of the Korban Pesach? Not other Korbanos, but the Korban Pesach we do allow him. Our answer is Kasavar Aninas the land of the Rabbanan. That Aninas nighttime is the Rabbanan. The Gave Pesach, as far as the Korban Pesach is concerned, lo immediately rain but mogel kares, since it carries the punishment of a kares, so they did not impose their Isser restriction in the face of the Korban Pesach, which carries the punishment of kares. But Gave Kachim, as far as other Kachim is concerned, immediately rain but mogel essay, they were mamid v'reim in the face of an essay. There's no chorus if he doesn't eat it. There's a mitzvah essay if he does, but there's no chorus, so they maintained their Isser D'Rabbanan of Aninas. Hashamei al Mesa, one who hears about that his relative was nifter, or malaket at Sama is then they can eat not only the Korban Pesach, other kachim as well. Because in this case, the etzem aninos is the Rabbanan, not the Raisa. And Einim Daraisa is also Bekachim, but this, the Etzem din over here is a Drabanan. So Malakin Atzamas Rektigamor, Malakin Atzamas. If he, literally, this would imply that he himself gathered the bones of his relative. Well, if he did, then he's Tomei Tumas Meis, Habai Hazah, Shlishi. Then he has a Tumas Meis, and how can he eat the korban at night? He has to have a 7-day Tara process with a sprinkling of the waters of the Paradum on the 3rd and 7th day. Emil Gemara says what it means is shelikto loy atzamas. Not that he gathered, but it was gathered on his behalf. But the relative was gathered for him. The relative's bones were gathered, so he has a din of an oinen derabban. But he himself was not Isaac in it, so he was not Tomei with Tumas Meis. Gershon is guy, so the year that was guy Pesach to Machlekes Beisham Beisil. Amar Rabba Brachan Rav Yechanan Machlekes Oral Noch. So it says that there's a milah, and we have Machlekes in the Mishnah, and it says that Parish Mina Orlik Parish Mina Kever. That Beisil says that he's Tomei Tumas Meis. So Rabba Brachan said Rav Yechanan that's only by Oral Noch when they mauled a guy. The Beisil Savik Zer Sheva Yitma L'Shana Mo. The Yaimer, where Beisil said there's a Gzeir, because they're concerned that perhaps in the next year that this person, this ger, will become Tomei with a Tumas Meis, and he might say, Ishnake Miloi Tavalti Vachalti, well, I was Tomei the last year, Erev Pesach, and Tavalti Vachalti, and I was Toivel, and then I ate the Korban Pesach. Achshem Nami Et V'Loicha. And so he'll say, even though this year he became Tomei Tumas Meis, he'll say, I'll be Toivel, and I can eat the Korban Pesach. Now, a Yid who becomes Tomei with a Tumas Meis, it's a Tahara process of 7 days with Hazah, Shlishi, and Shi. A Goy does not have that. He's not Tomei, doesn't have the Tumah of Tumas Meis. So therefore, this ger, we're afraid, Beisil says, we're afraid this ger will make a mistake. And he'll say, well, last year I was Tomei Tumas Meis, I was Toivel Erev Pesach, and I can eat the Pesach. So this year I'm Tomei Tumas Meis to be the same thing. But he won't realize is that in the prior year he was a goy and there's not Makabel Tumas Meis. And therefore that's why he was allowed to be Toivel and eat the Korban Pesach. But actually Yisrael Makabel Tumah. But this year he's a Yid, he's Yisrael Makabel Tumah, and he needs a 7-day purification process. And he's not able to do it. So, and therefore Beisil says, we're geyser. On that basis, therefore, the Ravid says it's not only therefore on Erev Pesach. According to Beis Hillel, it would be that you need a 7-day waiting period. It would have to be that the goy would not be allowed to do it unless there's a 7-day period, because otherwise it would be the same problem. He'll say, last year I didn't wait 7 days, and this year I also don't have to wait 7 days, so it's really not only Erev Pesach. But a Beis Shammai says loy gazrina, and Beis Shammai says we're not geyser on a case in this case over here. We don't make this gzera, the sasemis on the dike. We don't make this gzera for the Korban Pesach because it is something that has a Korban Pesach carries chorus with it. But we would make the gzera for other kachim, and therefore we would prohibit him from other kachim unless he does have the 7-day waiting period. But oral Yisrael, but if it's an oral Yisrael, Divra Kol, Toivel Vachas Pischal Erev. But if it's an oral Yisrael where you don't have that consideration, there's no room for that gzera. He could be Toivel Vachas Pischal Erev, Veloy Gazin Yisrael Mishum Oral Nochri, and we won't be geyser a yid onto a oral of a Nochri. We won't make that gzera. Tanya Namihachi, we learned as well in a Bryce. There's no machlekes on Or Yisrael that he can be toivel an Erev Pesach and eat the Korban Pesach later. So if he didn't have a milah for whatever reason, meso achemachs milah, or what he was not well until now, therefore we say he can be toivel and Erev Pesach. We're not going to. Alma nechlekol oral nochri. It's only al oral nochri. Shebei Shammai armin toivel vaychlas piskol erev. Beisolaimim aparish min orla kiparish min kever. And they say no, it's like parish min kever, and you have to have a 7-day waiting period. So over here it says clearly that the machlokes is by an oral nachri, not by an oral Yisrael. There's some dion in the achreinim, the sasemis and oral chashulchan, whether we would be geyser and on a case by other kodshim, and whether we would impose the 7-day tahara, the gzera, and we would be geyser a yid onto a goy by kodshim. Is it only by a korban pesach, but by other kodshim we would be geyser? Is that the sasemis? Oral chashulchan says no, that they're not geyser at all. Omarava orel, in the case of the oral, which we just had, or hazor, the case of sprinkling of the waters of the paraduma, the Ismail, and the knife of the using that we use for the milah, and milah divrei b'makom kares. The Rabbanon, there's an Isser Rabbanon, which we'll discuss shortly what the Isser Rabbanon is, but that Isser Rabbanon, they were mamin b'makom kares, and they imposed it, even though the person will not be able to be Mekayim the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach, which carries chorus with it. So these cases, they hamirid ram makaris. Oinen u'metzaira, but the case of an iron, on oinen and metzaira, lo hamirid ram b'makom kares. They did not impose it, and they did not maintain their Isser Rabbanon in the face of kares. The Gemara will now explain. Oral hada amran, the case of the oral, which we just mentioned, that if the ger, that if he's not able to impose the Yisur Rabbanan, he won't be able to do the Korban Pesach. Nevertheless, he made a different Makom Kares, and Beis Hillel said that he is punishment of kever, and he cannot participate in the Korban Pesach. Hazor, what's the case of Hazor Damar Mar? Hazor Shvus. To sprinkle with the waters of Paraduma is a Shvus. It's an Isser Rabbanan. The Rabbanan answered that. They impose an Isser on Isser Rabbanan. Ve'ena Deiche es a Shabbos. And it's a Shvus, and it is not Deiche Shabbos for the sake of the Korban Pesach. So therefore, if the 7th day of the Tara fell out on Erev Pesach, and if that is Shabbos, so if it's Yudal Shabbos, if you don't do the Hazah, then the person will not be able to eat from the Korban Pesach that night, and therefore he can't partake in the Korban Pesach. Hazah is a shus. Sprinkling of the water of the paraduma is only a shus, and the Rabbanan answered it because they were afraid he might carry Daled Amos of Shus Rabim. And nevertheless, they maintained that Isser Rabbanan, and they posed it in the face of the Kores, and therefore he will not be allowed to partake in the Korban Pesach, which has Kores, and so as not to violate this Isser Rabbanan. So they maintained the Isser Rabbanan in the face of Kores. Ismail, what's the case of the knife of the mill? L'sanya kishem she'im mevi moiseh derech Shus Rabim, just like you can't carry a knife, so the Shus Rabim, which is the Deraisa, Kachem Nevino Sederach Gagos, you can't carry it by way of rooftops, by Derach Hatzaris, so through courtyards, the Derach Karpipos, or through Karpipos, which are enclosed areas that are not Hekov Ladira, which are not enclosed for residential purposes. This is an Isser Rabbanan to carry over there, and they say that you can't carry the knife for the Milah even through these areas, which is, even though they're only an Isser Rabbanan, it's not a Deraisa, but if there's a milah to be done, and it's a Erev Pesach, and you, without being able to maul the child, the father cannot be Mekayim the Korban Pesach. He can't participate in the Korban Pesach. Now, if it turns out that Yud Dalet is on Shabbos, you can't carry, and the Rabbanan imposes this Isser Rabbanan, even in the face of preventing the father from being Mekayim the mitzvah milah and partaking in the Korban Pesach. They have mitzvah b'makom kares. Oinen, so what are the cases where loyhem mitzvah divrayim? Oinen is hadam. We mentioned that in the Mishnah, that even though there's an inus derabanan of the nighttime, and an oinen is also a kachim, they did not impose their issur derabanan, they allowed him to partake in the Korban Pesach. Metzora mahi, what's the case of Metzora? The son of Metzora shechal shmini shaloi berav Pesach. The Metzora on the 8th day, so he has to complete, normally a Metzora has to complete his Torah on the 8th day. He comes in to the Har Bayis, he comes in and he puts his hands outside the Shara and the corner, and he sticks his thumbs inside so that they can do the complete the tahara process, and to put his right hand and right foot inside, and the oil and the blood is placed on it, his right ear and his right thumb and the big toe on the right foot. That shar did not have the kedusha. They did not give it the kedusha of the azara. So therefore, he was allowed to come in. Now, so Mitzaira is allowed to come in to the Harabayas, and that's where he would stand normally. But in a case of Mesor Shechal Shmini Shalei B'Erev Pesach, if the 8th day of the Tahara is Erev Pesach, V'ro Keri B'Aviyayim, and he became a Baal Keri. Now, Baal Keri is also, as we'll see, is also to come in to the Machna Leviyah. So he's also to come into that area. So in that case, normally he would not be allowed to come in and stand outside the Shar in the corner. It would normally be also for him. But in this case over here, with Erev Pesach, we say, he can complete the Tahara, and he can eat the Korban Pesach that night. We allow him to do so. Amr Chacham Lecham said, Afal Pisha Tul Yom Eino Nichnas, even though what Tul Yom. So Baal carries a Tul Yom, meaning he goes to the mikveh that day and he's Torah at nighttime. But even though we say a Tul Yom, normally Eino Nichnas, he is not allowed to come into the Harabayas and Nichnas. This case we do allow it. Why is that? Mutav Yavah Yeseh Sheyesh Bo Kores. It's preferable that we should say that an essay Sheyesh Bo Kores should come v'yitcha Essay Shein Bo Kores. Now the Korban Pesach is an essay Sheyesh Bo Kores. Not doing it involves the punishment of Kores. That should be doicha the essay of not coming in to the Harabayas. Rav Yochanan says no, it's not. That's not the pshat. He says, there's no Issa Daraisa at all to come into the Harabayas Tul Yom. It's not an Issa Daraisa, it's an Issa Darabanan. So it says that Yeshafat and the people of Yehuda and Yerushalayim, they came into Beis Hashem in front of the Chatzar. And it says the Chatzar Chadash. So it was a time of a war, the Ammon and Moab and so were gathering against them, so they came to daven to Hashem. And it calls it the Chatzar Chadash. So why is it new? So it doesn't mean, therefore, the Gemara says, it doesn't mean that it was built, it was newly built. It means Shechit Sheboy Davar V'Omer. They're machadish something. They call it Chadash because at that time they made a Chiddush. And they said, Tul Yom lo yikonas v'machna leviyah. They made a chiddush, and they said that the Tul Yom can not come into the machna leviyah. So that's an Issa D'Rabbanan, and that's what it means over here. So therefore, they said that the Mitzayir on the Shemini Shalom, that he is allowed to come into the Harabayas in order to complete the Tahara to the Korban Pesach. So this is a case where Loi Heimidu Divrayim. But they're not Mamad Divrayim. Taisa says that it's this Isser D'Rabbanan in the Harabayas is not in the whole Harabayas. It's only from the Ezras Noshim and further in, closer in. So what's the case of the Beis HaPras? Beis HaPras, the case of Beis, but this not we learned in the following V'Sham Beis Hillel. That Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that Shebaitkin La'isei Pesach. That if a person is coming to the Korban Pesach and he encounters a Beis HaPras. What is a Beis HaPras? A Beis HaPras is a field that had a kever, that had a grave was plowed over. And we're concerned that their bones, fragments of the bones, are scattered about, and perhaps he's going to come into contact with it. So what we say is he can be baidik, and the ain't bait can like truma. But if a Kayan is coming to truma, and he encounters a Beis HaPras, we don't allow him to check and examine the Beis HaPras. We say he has to go and take a detour, and even if it involves a delay of a day or two, and nevertheless, he still has to take a detour to do it. But we do allow him to be boidek the Beis HaPras in order to be mekayim the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach. So we see that they were not Mamad Divrayim in the face of Koros. My Baitkim, how do we check it? Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Menapeach Beis HaPras V'Hoylech. He blows the ground in front of him, and he examines it to see that there's no bone fragments, and he's allowed to walk through. Meaning the Isser of Beis Pras is only a Chumah D'Rabbanan. The field was plowed, and there's a Chumah D'Rabbanan, perhaps the bones were scattered about, and there's a bone that's the size of a Sa'ira, which could be Matama him with Maga. And therefore, in this case over here, we allow him to blow the ground in front of him and just to see that there are no bone fragments and allow him to walk through. Rashi explains, well, why aren't we concerned about too much oil? And therefore, there's too much oil, even if the bone is buried deep in the ground, too much by kas oil, and you'll be matama with oil. So Rashi says that we're not concerned, because to be matama with oil, it's only if the bone's the roid minyan or roid binyan. And that's not a concern over here, because since it was plowed over, we're not concerned that there be bones of that size. So therefore, it's not matama by oil, and if he blows in front of him and he sees that there's no bones there, he can walk through. Rav Yehuda bar Abai Mishmei Rav Yehuda Omer, he says, Beis Pras shen nidosh tor. He says, if you have a Beis Pras that was nidosh, that it was trampled on, it's tor, because if it's trampled on, either that the bones got moved to the side, or that they crushed and they don't have the size of a barley seed anymore. So it's not etzem kesayr anymore. So therefore, you can examine to see that if it's being nidosh and you see it was trampled on, then you can be samech on that and walk through it to Mekayim the Korban Pesach. So this is another case where loyhem miracham divrayim b'malkam kares. Haralach yisha, haralach yisha, haralach yisha. Misha yatzayim v'derech chayki v'lo yasarisha yasas hasheni.